They call it psycho dad and fun dad. I don't want to run around the bench like a monkey.
You called me a Euro snob last time.
Yeah.
Well, I'm definitely not. No,
For the turtleneck today. What do you mean?
There you go.
I'm Erling Haaland. I'm Dominic Soboslai. We had potential to catch lightning in a bottle. When you can't walk down the street, I became agoraphobic.
Do you feel that CONCACAF are discriminating against Canada? Hi everyone, I'm Stephen Caldwell.
And I'm Kevin Kilbane.
And what do you think of our new surroundings, Kev? Graham Leggett's lovely pub, isn't it?
Welcome everyone to our new podcast, Park the Bus, Stevie. The surroundings are perfect. I think they're perfect for us. I'm not trying to...
What's your favourite tipple? Pint of Guinness?
I like a Guinness, yeah, I do. Yeah. I like anything, as it turns out. But I think you know me a little bit better than that. I do like a Guinness. And I think, as I said, we're in perfect surroundings. It would be nice if we could have a pint delivered to us while we're doing this podcast. Yeah. But anyway, that's for another day, isn't it? But I'm looking forward to getting started with this, Stevie, because... we've spoken about it. I don't even know how long we've spoken about this. Probably since I've been in Canada now over 5 years at this stage. So we've been speaking about it for the best part of 5 years that we can get this up and running, haven't we?
We want a forum like this. We want to have honest and open discussions. Me and you like a little argument in the green room. Yeah. Why not bring it into Graham Leggett's? Have our discussions, our arguments, our debates here. So that's the theme of this podcast. It's going to be international based. We're going to head towards a home World Cup for Canada, but we're going to have every nation's stories within this, and we'll have some fantastic special guests. We'll have some friends of ours coming in here, and we'll make this pub as packed as we can on a weekly basis. We
will be on social media platforms as well. Both you and I are on, so we can get a lot of interaction as well with people asking questions and things like that of us. We'll try and answer the sensible questions. Let's just leave it as that. But I think there is a lot that we can get into. If we've only got a year now, Steve. We're a year out, and it's crazy to think, if we're going back, Qatar was that Winter World Cup, wasn't it? Back end of that World Cup, we were thinking, it's only 3.5 years now till the next World Cup, and bang, where's that gone, that 2.5 years?
Quick, isn't
Before we know it, we're ready to crack on again. So there's going to be a lot to talk about. Right now, if you're looking at qualifications, certainly from the Euro side of it that we would do, look at Italy, Stevie, and Italy looking troubled, aren't they, straight off the bat?
Again, Kevin, how can they possibly be in trouble again? But we looked at that group when we saw it drawn, and we felt like Norway with Sorloth and Haaland and Odegaard, Nusa's coming to the fold, the Leipzig man. We saw a team that were capable of pushing them, and it looks like Italy are going to be in a bit of trouble. But they've got another way coming through the playoffs. But the pressure on them after what's happened in 18 and 22 is going to be immense.
Unbelievable. And into next year's World Cup, Stevie, that Italy have not won a game at the World Cup since they lifted the trophy. Not won one World Cup game since they lifted the World Cup in 2006. Unbelievable. They had a bad World Cup in 14. Obviously, things haven't gone well for them since, with not qualifying as well. Qualification, get into playoffs.
Yes.
I'm going to make a statement now, they will not top that group. So the best way that they get to the World Cup is by playoff, which is going to be difficult in itself because of what Norway are doing right now. Norway are going to be finding themselves 9 points clear of them. They're going to have to make up goals because Norway are flying.
Yep.
And Italy, if you look at them historically, they're not a team that's going to go and destroy sides. So they'll get results, yes.
It's the one area that we've always questioned up top, haven't we? They've got Retegui, they've got a few guys, Raspadori.
Yeah.
They've never really settled on that number 9 that we've seen in the past, that key figure that they've had. And they're inexperienced under Spalletti. They've had many ups and downs. At times they look like they're building something significant, but I still think it's a work in progress. And if I think about them potentially going into that playoff and the pressure, Kev, that's going to be on their shoulders, I just think that, the scrutiny that's going to be coming out of Italy, the scrutiny throughout the world on a pretty young squad's shoulders is going to be significant. So we'll keep an eye on that one. There'll be many other stories that will develop over the course of time. I'm excited to see the battle for the rest of the roster with Canada. We know that they've got 30 plus guys that are all feeling like they could be in that squad. They could be playing home World Cup games. So I think that'll be an exciting one.
You know what, Stevie? All these games that we've got coming up, Gold Cup included, and the next 3 or 4 windows, you get an understanding now of how key every window is for Canada,
Yeah.
and how important it is for every player that when they show up to those windows, not just the games, they have to produce day in, day out in training. They've got to be impressing Jesse Marsch every day they're out there. So there's a lot at stake here, isn't there, over the next year?
Yeah, with that in mind, we went down to BMO Field, didn't we? And we had our first chat, our first podcast. We had a chat with Jesse Marsch in the locker room.
Jesse, thanks for joining us again. You've joined us a few times now, so we really appreciate you giving up your time and coming to speak to us. You've had a long trip to get here as well, and we're in comfortable surroundings for you, Stevie, aren't we here?
Yeah.
So we're in a good spot. Where was yours? Where did you sit?
I was here,
yeah,
just behind you.
Okay.
Not in a Canada dressing room, in a Tier 2 one, but you're going to be in a Canada one, Jesse.
Yeah.
A
I
year's
like
time.
it here, right? It's nice.
Yeah.
It's a nice dressing room, nice stadium. So
It feels a bit dark in here, no? Is it maybe you get more...
well, I like when, even when we come in, the TFC colors mesh well with the Canada colors, and we get more emblems in here, and it makes us feel like home. So, but we've only played, in my 15 matches, we've only played at home twice.
Right.
So we're excited for the next 3 to be at home more and play in front of our fans.
Yeah, so you'll be getting used to the surroundings here before that first game and trying to get acclimatised to what it's going to be like for a World Cup match here at BMO Field.
Yeah, and excited about that, right? It's getting closer and closer, and a lot closer than I think most people realize. But we feel a sense of urgency. Working with Kevin Blue has been great. Like, we're really, I think, making a lot of progress on a lot of different levels. Everything from the fundraising to the infrastructure to looking at the different possibilities of what we can achieve with the youth programs, both men and women. Having Casey around, I think, has also been a real plus. And so we're making progress, and that's a good feeling, and it makes us feel like, we're really preparing ourselves.
I think
for
there's
next
so
summer.
much positivity now. We're a year out, of course, till the big event. There's a lot expectancy now probably put on your shoulders and on the team's shoulders now. There's people that's probably got an interest in the game now that haven't necessarily had an interest before as well. So it's exciting times, really. It feels like that being here as well now.
Yep.
I think there's, we've had a tour of the stadium this morning, Stevie and I, to show, how it's going to be developed and where we're going to be going to in the next year. It is quite a special feeling around it all now. I don't know how you feel about it yourself.
Yeah, I mean, there are days when you walk around town here in Toronto or Vancouver, whatever, wherever we have been, where you can really get the feeling like people know it's around the corner. And then there's other days where, some people say, like, when is the World Cup again? And we're like, what do you mean?
Should know the date off by heart.
But obviously over the next year, there's you guys, we're going to see more of you guys, we're going to see more of a little bit of everything. Then what's important is that the fans get to see more of the team, right? That's the way that I think we really create a movement for the start of the World Cup, is that we get more home matches, we get more good performances, we keep showing the improvement and quality of the group, and then I think the excitement will continue to grow.
Well, that's a year away, and we always love talking about team. We know that you're all about teams, Jesse, but we want to hear a little bit more about you today and your journey. And I'll take you right to the end of your playing career. And was coaching on your mind? Was it always a thing as you went through the latter stages of your playing career that you would go into coaching? And how did that start in the beginning?
Yeah, so I went to Princeton University because of Bob Bradley, not because of the university. Right? I met him, and I was like, wow, he's different. And I wanted to be around him. And obviously, I knew Princeton was a great school, but I felt strongly that man was going to help me understand, like, what high-level development and professionalism was like at a young age. And when I went there, it was not just learning about the kind of player I could be, but it was about the kind of leader I could be. And he really invested in all of us that way, but he really invested in me a lot. Playing for him professionally, at about 26 years old, I realized that I could be good. I could be a good coach, and I wanted to do that. And I knew I was a good player, but I was a little bit limited physically.
Were you coaching during that stage of your career
So
as well?
at that time, I started taking my badges. I started coaching youth soccer. I started volunteering at universities to be one of the assistant coaches. So I was pretty active. A lot of players go home at 2 o'clock, take a nap, get up for dinner, and go to bed again.
Yeah.
I was pretty active. I was out on the pitch a lot with young teams.
Were you working hard enough on the field when you were playing?
Well, I mean, Yes, yes, but there were days where I was tired. And then having young families, you guys know what that's like, right? Like it can be exhausting. But I knew I could be good at it. You know, I really felt strongly that I had big potential to be a good coach.
What do you think the attributes were in you that made you?
Well, I thought that I had a good eye for the game. I thought I was a really good organizer and communicator. Like I was kind of always the coach on the pitch, and I played in the middle of the park. I was pretty slow, so if I didn't have everybody in the right positions, then I couldn't cover the ground to do the things that needed to be done, and then my value as a player dropped, right? So I knew by maximizing the potential of what we were doing as an organization, as a team, and then how I was able to understand how to access sort of the personality and qualities of each player, then the more important I would be, the better we would be as a team, the more valuable I would be, the longer I could play, maybe the more they'd pay me. They never really paid me much, so that never really came in. But, you know, and so I felt like in all those ways that was something I was good at. And so I knew I had to transform it into what it was like to be a coach. I had to change messages. I had to develop messages. I had to have the same kind of relationships, but in a different role. And so even as much as I felt good about the preparation, the full adjustment to then being a head coach after my career was over was still a big one.
Did you find it daunting? And I'm going in relation to North American coaches having success. Did you see your success being away from these shores, or did you want to just become a success domestically first and foremost?
When I was in Salzburg, the first interview I did, and I did it in German, and they asked me, was it my dream always to coach in Champions League? And I said, no, it was my dream to live in Europe so I could watch Champions League at night. Because it was impossible for people in North America.
School run trying to watch a Champions League game.
From Wisconsin, like I described at that point that the percentage chance of me becoming a Champions League coach when I was a young footballer was zero. Zero. Right? And so in some ways I told them I was playing with house money, but in other ways I was just I thought if I could maximize the potential of who I could become as a leader, as a coach, that I could be successful in MLS, and then maybe, as a dream, coach the U.S. national team. That was kind of the progression then. But then when I joined the New York Red Bulls and I saw the investment that they made in me and the belief that they had in me to be a bigger part of the organization, then I started to change a little bit what my ideas of my goals could be.
So was the Red Bull organisation a perfect fit for you, Jesse, or were you shaped by that organisation over time by being in it?
I'm naturally aggressive personality, right? Like if you watch me play, I think when I retired, I had the most yellow cards, the most fouls. I like that, is it? Yeah. I think I probably had the most F-bombs on the pitch, and I was an aggressive guy. I wanted to win. I didn't care about being liked. Winning was the utmost thing for me, and so when I had been developing a playing style through the mentors that I had, specifically Bob Bradley, but other mentors that I had in the U.S. Then when I went to Montreal, I tried to put some things into practice, but we had a little bit of an older team, and so we weren't able to be as aggressive as I wanted. And so when I started to talk to Red Bull, specifically Gerard Houllier and Ralph Rangnick, about the idea that I had when I interviewed for the New York Red Bulls job, I think they could see that the ideas that I had were similar to theirs.
Right.
Now, the depth of detail was very different, but at least the concepts that I wanted about pressing and counter-pressing and playing vertical football, and they were like, okay, this guy thinks like us.
So it was like a hand-in-hand relationship, I suppose, then. That it was more, Stevie's asking the question, who influenced who? It was almost a bit of both.
I believe they hired me because they thought I was a really good fit. Right? And it turned out to be true. Yeah. And I still hold so many of those principles that I learned specifically from Ralph Rangnick so close to me in terms of the way that I try to get my teams to play football. And I think if you have the right kinds of talents and personalities in the team that can thrive under this system, that you can really be good and be very difficult to play against, which is one of the reasons why I took this job, because I felt that way.
Yeah, the fit was there as well. Tell us about your relationship with Ralph Rangnick, how that's developed, Jesse, over the course of time.
Ralph, so Bob and Ralph are similar from a personal perspective because they're both very, very serious people, right? They're very intense, and when it comes to doing the job, they are incredibly focused. my personality is a little bit different. You know, I'm a little bit more jovial in my normal life, and then I have this switch that turns on when it comes to training and football and these kinds of things. And so in some ways, I know that I'm a little bit sometimes difficult for the players to read because I call it psycho dad and fun dad, and they're trying to figure out a little bit which one is which at which time.
But do you like that? Do you like that sort of
I don't know.
instability?
I mean, I don't want them to fear me. You know,
Right.
but I want them to know that there's a time to work and then there's a time to enjoy the process of who we are as a team. Ralph, so because Ralph is a very, you know, intense individual, like it's not so easy to get really close to him, but that was okay, you know, and we were close enough that when we worked together, we had a really strong relationship. We had a lot of similar beliefs. He invested in me, but it wasn't just him. It was guys also in the organization like Helmut Gross, Wolfgang Geiger, who helped him build it, and then Oliver Minzlaff, who kind of now runs almost all of Red Bull. These were people that overall, I think, saw the potential of who I was as a person, as a coach, and they helped mentor me, challenge me, and then give me opportunities. I mean, when you deal with Germans, right, and I don't know how many German footballers you've encountered in your life, it's not always the warmest experience, you know, and the way that you know that there's confidence in who you are is by the decisions that they make to play you, to give you opportunities. And so that was a clear indicator to me that they believed in me by the way they treated me and the opportunities they gave.
And I was going to say, how quickly then did you realise then that progression was there for you? And did you, it's almost as if you take it with both hands, but did you think, now I want to go to Europe. Now I'm part of this organisation, and that is where I want to go.
When was that first mentioned?
Well, look, we went. They hired me. They brought me to Qatar. It was the first time the three coaches from Leipzig, Salzburg, and New York had ever been together. I watched training for 36 hours. They took me through some video and some examples of what they do, and then they sent me to New York and said, "Good luck." Right? We played great. We won the Supporters' Shield. We had a great team. Then I went back there, and they had some issues with what was going on at Salzburg. And at that time, they said, what about becoming the Salzburg coach now? And I didn't feel right about it at the time. I had just started the New York project. I had asked a lot of people to come, players, coaches, to come and commit to the project. And even though the idea of the ambition of going to Europe and everything seemed great, I didn't feel like it was the time because of what we were doing in New York. So I told them no. And they looked at me like I was crazy. Like, you want to stay in MLS? And I was like, yeah. I mean, and I love my job in New York, you know? So it wasn't ever like, oh, I want to leave MLS and I want to go to Europe. It was also still that I was developing who I was. Like, this was my first successful season as a coach, and I needed to continue to build on that, and there was more work to be done. Yeah, I felt like there was more work to be done. Look, even when I left for Europe, there was talk about me being the U.S. national team coach, and I didn't feel like at the time I was ready to be the U.S. national team coach either. Like, you need a wealth of experiences under your belt in order to take on these big leadership roles and big footballing roles. So I wanted to kind of make sure that step by step, German, they say Schritt for Schritt, that I was kind of, you know, honoring a development path for me that would help me be successful long term.
And you make that step, you go to Salzburg, and it's very successful. You get there, you get some very high-profile young players. What was the initial experience like? What was your mindset stepping into that job? And what did you take from New York into Salzburg?
Yeah. Well, so when I went to Salzburg, it was the first time the team was going to Champions League. They had failed for 12 seasons to get through the qualifying round. So they got a direct play-in because the point total in Austria had grown, and now the champion was going automatically into Champions League. At the same time, we sold 9 of our 11 starters going into that season. So we had to then evaluate a lot of the young talent and then try to prepare them as quickly as possible to see if they could compete in these matches in Champions League. We draw a very tough group that includes Liverpool, the defending champion. But right away, after 2 days of training, the thoughts that I had on Erling Haaland, on Dominik Szoboszlai, on Patson Daka, on Taki Minamino, on Enoch Mwepu, you know, I could go down the list of all these like high potential, Hee-Chan Wang and Messiah. So there was so many good young players that I was like, we're going to be even better than I hoped. you know, which was an exciting proposition. And kind of with the staff, we all knew that we had potential to catch lightning in a bottle.
I asked you before, you know, at the start of it, I said about, did you want to go to Europe? There's been very few North American coaches that have had the success, if any, that you've had in Europe. Did you feel it from that end that there might have been? I think you called me a Euro snob last time. I talked to you as well. So I'm definitely not. No, definitely not.
What do you mean? You're wearing the turtleneck today. What do you mean?
There you go. There you go.
He looks like a Euro snob.
There you go. There you go. But off the back of that, if I can continue now, cheers, guys. But no. But did you feel any sort of prejudice towards you as an American going over? Did you feel that at any stage?
Not at that time.
No.
And I'll tell you why, because I learned German, you know, and I acclimated myself to being in Europe. And so they talked about me being American. Like in the German language, they use this word open to describe people whose personalities are more extroverted, right? I mean, I feel like in North America, we don't say that as much. Even in England, you know, in the UK, you don't say it as much because we're all pretty open. Yeah. Like we're not a closed culture that way, you know? So, and I always just thought, you know, and then they would say, oh, you're very positive like an American. And I understood what they were saying, but I also think that I'm sort of a serial positive thinker even in the US. Like I believe in the power of positive thinking. I believe in the human spirit. I believe in the power of people doing something special together. And that's a big reason why I do this for a living, is because if I didn't believe in that, I wouldn't be fulfilled personally as much by it, right? Yeah. So, and you know, even when I manage teams, whether it's, you know, this is the thing about football, whether it's been in the US, Austria, Germany, England, here in Canada, you have many people from many different cultures that speak many different languages. And the more I think that you're able to create a common identity that is about each other, then the ability for people to throw themselves at it and give everything to the group, I think increases your chances of success. And I always say it's more fun. It's just more fun. Yeah. Right? Then if I just show up at work and I'm cold and I don't really speak to anybody, I don't really look anybody in the eye, I point at the tactics and I say, we're doing this, we're doing that, and then I go out on the pitch and my assistants run all training and then I go home. I'm sorry, if that's what being a football coach was, and I know it is for some people, I wouldn't do it. It's not for me. You know, mine is young men, like getting to know them, helping them develop as people, helping them be better brothers, better sons, better fathers, better teammates, right? And then through that experience and that relationship, helping them develop their potential of the footballer they can become. And I'll be honest with you, the reason I went to Europe was basically for that. Because I knew that a lot of people operated in cold environments because of the way that the leaders run clubs. And I wanted to see if this idea that I had about more than about people and football could thrive and could succeed, right? Mm-hmm. What were the receipts? Yeah, sometimes yes, sometimes no. You know, like even when I coached Leipzig, there were times where players would say to me, stop talking to me because the more you talk to me, I think you're going to start me in the lineup. And then I call my parents, I say I'm starting on the weekend. And I would say to them, what do you mean? Like, if I'm talking to you and I'm talking to you about things you need to do to grow and get better, like I'm showing that I care about you and make the investment. But in this business, you're not given anything. Anything. Right? And you have to fight for everything. So I'm here to try to help you to show the pathway with me as your coach and leader on how I think you can improve and how I think you can succeed. But I'm not handing you anything. Right? Yeah. Just like nobody's handed me anything. And I think that there was an impasse in Germany in that way, you know, and it wasn't just with players, it was with staff and a lot of
So did you feel a change then in Germany? You said before that you not at first you felt that maybe, was it Germany where maybe there was a slight change?
It's a colder type of environment, you know, it's very focused on results. I learned a lot in Germany by the structure of clubs and the structure of training and the structure of football. Because this is what Germans thrive in, you know? I used to often say that Germans thrive in black and white, right? Really. But there's this whole colorful space right? And I think that's kind of where the beauty of life is, right? Is like, if you can capture, the black and white's almost the easiest, right? The colorful part is the most complex, but it's also the most rewarding, right? And I even think from a results perspective, if you can't ever master the colorful, but if you can now get those pieces right, then you can really enjoy success. Now, when I speak about Germans and all, I don't mean to generalize, because not everyone's the same. Like, it's not fair to say that, but there are definitely cultural trends. And even when you coach football teams, whether it's in Canada, whether it's players that are French, Canadian, or whether they're from Vancouver, there's little differences, right? And I think the more that I can be on top of like what those differences are and how I can help them still commit to what we're creating, then they can feel part of it.
Yeah. Are you at your best, Jesse, when you're coaching young, high potential talent, and was that environment different when you got to Leipzig?
No, I don't. I say this like a lot of the times, even Ralph Rangnick would say to me, is like, well, it's easier to coach young players and they can develop faster, and they're not built with the previous successes and negative things, so we can kind of build them and mold them from the start, right? And I'm like, okay, that's true. It is true. I was like, but if we're saying that older players and older people can't develop, then what does that say about us?
Yeah.
Is that not just a hardened way, though? I think you become
but
hardened.
Can you break that? I think that's the question.
I know. I think that when you have setbacks and major setbacks across the course of your career, I think that hardens you. And people say it toughens you up. I don't think it toughens you up. I think it just hardens you, it makes you more stubborn.
But some of my most favorite players that I coached were older. Rodrigo at Leeds, he developed quickly into the idea of the striker I wanted him to become, and he loved it. I had players in New York, some French center backs, Damien Pernel, Aurélien Collin, Ronald Zubar, three that I heard a lot about how difficult French players could be and older French players, and they were three of my favorite players that I ever coached. So I could go down a list of even more. Bradley Wright Phillips, I mean, amazing guy, like one of my favorite players that I've ever coached, and his ability to commit and want to do all the things and do it for the team, not just for me, but to do it for the team. Like, these are high-level guys that were able to adapt. And again, there were 30 probably, most of them, right? Like, we know that's not old.
No.
It's
not the age we're at now, is it? So why was it so difficult in Leipzig then, Jesse?
Well, it was cultural.
Right.
It was cultural.
Right.
But listen, I knew that before I went.
Yeah.
But Herr Mateschitz, the head of Red Bull, I said it won't work. I told him that. And he goes, well, I said the way they think about football now, because Julian Nagelsmann, it kind of changed the model. And I said, and the way they think about leadership, it won't work. And he said, that's exactly why we want you to go. We want you to create what you created in New York, what you created in Salzburg. We want the club in Leipzig to go back to the football we wanted to play, and we want the experience and the heart of the team to grow. Which I agreed with him, but I said, okay, but I'm going to need full support. And he said, you have it. But when I was there, I had no sport director, I had no technical director, I was by myself, right? And so I'm not making excuses. I knew it was going to be a challenge.
Was there a pushback within the locker room as well, do you think?
It was even in the staff.
Yeah.
Right.
It was even in the club.
Yeah.
Like,
did you take
who's
a lot
this
of your
American
staff?
and what does he want? And I love having I have my door open so that even when I call you into my office and we're going to talk, okay, I think you need to do better here and I need to do better here. There's no secrets. There's no closing the door and going, you make mistakes and why do you make mistakes? No, like, this vulnerability for me in coaching and in leadership is important, and for everybody to know that everybody has to improve, and this is an accepted form of what we do. Right? I think that vulnerability is massively important if you want to help people develop and grow and get better. And that is, I think, paramount to success.
What appealed to you about Leeds United in the Premier League?
Look, it was a big decision to go there because I knew how big the club was. A big part behind my decision to go there was they had been scouting me for 2 years, and they were really committed to me being there. They felt I was the right fit. I also had watched the way they played under Marcelo Bielsa, and I thought there were a lot of congruencies to the way he does things and the way I do things. But our personalities, again, are very different. And I think that the player pool had gone through a lot with Marcelo, and he's a very intense person, and I think that they had now kind of reached the limit, at least what they thought inside the club, of what they could handle from his leadership, and bringing in someone like me seemed to make more sense. I can only say that my experience of coaching that team and working with the lads on the team and the commitment they gave me was amazing. And you know, it's a big project when you talk about being in the Premier League and being a have-not. You know, it's just a different. I had kind of been lucky to be on the upper end usually of the talent pool in the different leagues I was in, and this was a different kind of project in every way. But the guys were committed. They knew that, you know, the carrot there was if you didn't give everything you had every day, full attention in video sessions, full commitment in the matches, do everything you could to fight for every inch at every moment, then you go to the championship.
Yeah.
You know, and nobody wanted to be in the championship. Nobody wanted to have their salaries cut. When we survived, I had a bunch of the players come up to me and say, now I can keep my kids in private school.
Yeah, it's true. That's the reality, isn't it? And the one thing I found, I got relegated with Sunderland when I was fairly young, and it was more the staff, the redundancies that came around the club. And the one, I think that was the harsh lesson to me as a young player, that about what the family orientation and what the club actually means, not just obviously supporters, but the general staff around it, whether it's an extra masseur that comes in or whatever we would have had. And I know that you staved off that, and that when you have that big one euphoric moment, I'm sure that was the, you know, what is it to achieve? What you want to win things.
Yeah.
That's a win.
In
my eyes, that is a win.
I've never celebrated harder in my life than when we finished 17th. Okay, so like I kind of knew it at the time, but I said to even the leadership before we played the last week, I said, look, I could create a world for you to tell you that actually in the long term of the project, it's better for us to go down, build this the right way, and kind of step by step make this so that it can withstand the pressures of the Premier League. Because if we do survive next year, it's going to kind of be still Band-Aid situations and not really developing the foundation we need. And so it's not that turned out to be the case, but that's just the reality. Like the true idea of how to build it is still that, well, if it's not going well, then we have to throw money at this decision and that decision and this. And often, who's the man out the door? It's the coach. I mean, in my year, there was 17 coaching changes, if you include the summer. Like, this is not conducive to success. I don't care what business you're in. You can't have leaders in the organization have an average half-life of 9 months or whatever. You will never be able to build something that is sustainable. And that's a little bit of the shame of when I watch the Premier League.
So I was listening to a podcast on Sean Dyche, and he was saying the same thing about Everton, what was happening on behind the scenes as he was trying to help that club survive. So does the pressure and the scrutiny come from the press and the media? Is that what's so different about England in terms of expectations and you know, a team like Leeds or a team like Everton are expected to win and be in the Premier League and be mid-table or competing for Europe?
Look, it is, right? It is. But I tell you personally, it wasn't that was what affected me. But I knew this Leeds United was the only team I've ever coached where I talked about social media and fan involvement like almost daily, right? And so that's interesting in itself. I mean, I think you could ask.
Did you realise how big Leeds was before you went there?
Yes and no. I mean, I knew. It's not like, you know, you're in football. You know, Leeds is a big club, but when you're in it, right, and when you can't walk down the street, you know, like this was the first time that I was truly a public figure. I became agoraphobic, and it wasn't that people were never rude to me, but I just didn't like being watched and followed, and you know, I just
supermarket
always having to be on.
I mean, and people were nice, and I don't mind taking photos, and I'm not trying to say that like I'm up here, and it's just I want to be normal. I just you know, I just want to be with my family, live like we work hard, you know, we put everything we have into our jobs, and then I enjoy when you can step away and then you can just live your life, right? But this was impossible.
I honestly, the one thing I've talked about Sunderland before, but the one thing when I signed for Sunderland, you played for Newcastle and Sunderland, was that intensity that I found just going to the supermarket, people scrutinising what you're putting in your shopping cart, all these sort of things. It was, to me, it was obviously a huge step up because I realised you go into the Premier League, it's very different. But for a manager, that's almost like 10 times the pressure that you're feeling as a player to an extent.
And here's how it impacted things. Is then my world wasn't about the scrutiny of me, it was how the players were handling their scrutiny.
Yeah.
Right? And like trying to create an environment where they could stay focused on the things that matter, where you could create, like when I first came in, the first thing I said was, guys, there's plenty of time. We have 12 games left. Everyone has to just exhale, right? We have time. We're going to go about this day by day, week by week, moment by moment. And that's what we did. And we were able to, survive and be successful. But in those situations, the players are young. They read a lot. Their parents read a lot. Their girlfriends read a lot. They have a lot of distractions. Their agents, they have a lot of things now that are in the way of them just being able to focus to do the best job they can on the pitch. And that was what was my stress, was how do I help them? They're young. They're still developing as people. A lot of times they're millionaires, they make this much money, and they're people, man. Like the money doesn't change their ability to deal with scrutiny and attacks and everything else. Like they're still very vulnerable young people, and it was always about me trying to help them be stronger and solidify in every way who they are, so that when they stepped on the pitch in these high intensity environments against teams that were often much better than us, how do I provide them with the confidence and the understanding of how they're going to solve this big puzzle together, right? That's what the stress was. How do you get your finger on the pulse of all these things so that they could be their best?
Let's talk about your red card at Nations League and how incensed you were by decisions and it had been building. Do you feel that CONCACAF are discriminating against Canada, that because Canada are becoming one of the big boys and competing consistently with Mexico and USA, that there's in a lot of places they're being kept down there?
So when I first took the job, when I met with all the guys, right, the guys who I thought were going to be the leaders, they said to me that they were excited to have me as the coach because they like the football and they think that with my experiences, that I bring things that can help the team. But they said also that they hope that then the profile of what the team is by having a higher profile coach can also help them gather more respect, right? And my response, honestly, at that point was like, well, if we keep getting results, then we'll keep earning that respect. You guys finished first in CONCACAF, blah, blah, blah. And now over a year, we've did the best of Copa America of any CONCACAF team. We won on the U.S. soil for 67 years. We've beat the U.S. twice. We have the highest FIFA ranking we ever have had. And I can see probably more than ever what those players were talking about, right? And so after the Mexico game, when for me it's a clear penalty and it's not even reviewed, it's scary to me. It's scary. And so the only thing you're left with going is what's happening here. And so the players came to me after that match and said, Coach, you got to stand up for us. Like, there's only so much we can do. And, maybe it's the assistants, maybe it's you. We don't. And I took that to heart. And I'll tell you, I wanted to go after the ref for the first penalty, but the fourth official he said to me, we watched it against Mexico. We're all aware of what happened to you, and we're reviewing it very closely. And then they whistled for it to happen. And I thought I should have lost my mind then,
Yeah.
The Jonathan wasn't a foul, but I felt like I'd missed my opportunity, so I took that.
You wanted to take the garbage.
And then I talked with some CONCACAF officials, and I talked to them about this theme, and then I just said, look, I don't know that there's with all these things, whether you talk about me in England or whatever, I don't know that it's always necessarily totally intentional, but there's institutionalism that you're fighting a lot. And look, I hope that with this team emerging, and what I tried to say to CONCACAF is it has been the U.S.-Mexico show for a long time. But Canada has started the emergence 3-4 years ago and is clearly still ascending. And you have Panama, also the best they've ever been, and Jamaica clawing its way into that top 5 group, right? So, and I said, and isn't this good for CONCACAF, by the way? Isn't this good for our region to have more emerging top quality players and teams? and attracting better coaches, like even Tom Christensen at Panama is Poch obviously at the U.S. Aguirre's done it before, but and now you have in Jamaica Steve McLaren. Yeah. So I think you've got some of the best coaching pools, some of the best player pool that's ever been in CONCACAF, and let's try to even the playing field. Let's try to even the playing field.
Do you feel like that's something that's you're knocking your head against a brick wall there? I don't know. How do you
influence?
Where's the
outcome?
Well,
you try to have these conversations. Yeah. You try to look. In general, on the bench, my way of dealing with things is if something happens once, then usually you try before the game to say, hey, just keep an eye on this and this and this.
Yeah.
And then the first time that something like that happens in the game, hey, remember we talked before the match. Then the second time, hey man, what's going on? Third time, all right. If it doesn't change, fourth time, you leave me no other recourse but to escalate my behavior. And I don't want to run around the bench like a monkey.
Yeah.
But you have to, and the players were right. We had to sort of make a statement. So, yeah.
Are you the spokesman for these guys? Do you feel a big responsibility to be that focal point in terms of them trying to strive to be undisputed number one in CONCACAF?
No, I want them to be the voice, right? Even inside Canada, it's really important. I say all the time, they're Canadian, right? Not me. I'm learning from them what it means to be Canadian, and I'm learning from them a lot, and in general from the overall experience, what it means to be the Canadian national team coach, but they need to be at the forefront of everything that we're doing, and then it's my job to create a platform and facilitate that for them, right? And I've said that to them, in so many words, and they know that, right? But of course, as the coach, you're a leader, and you have to represent all the things that are meaningful to what the team is, especially with the home World Cup. But in the end, they are the ones. They are the ones that are on the pitch. They are the ones that are Canadian. They are the ones that the fans love. And so the better I can do that platform and that facilitation, then the better they can show how good they are. And they're good. They're really good.
In terms of that, then, being Canadian, where do you go? How far do you push the barrier or the boundaries in selection? Because there's been a couple of names mentioned. I saw Tristan Blackman mention recently that he could be potentially called up somewhere down the line. Maybe as blunt as it is, why would you select someone that's not got Canadian blood?
Well, so I've only scouted so far, besides Tristan.
Or why would you consider it, should I say?
Really, he's the only one that has no Canadian blood.
Yeah.
All the other ones, and by the way, a lot of them I've spoken to their parents, and then I've said, you have the opportunity to represent multiple countries, and you have to understand that, especially with our player pool and how important it is to our players to be Canadian and to be the Canadian national team, that we have to make sure that whoever we bring in feels that. And the reason, the first conversation with Tristan, and I didn't even want it to get out at all, right? It was just an exploratory conversation about where he was in his life and in his career and the possibilities. And the crux of the conversation were, if you do this, it can't just be, oh, this is good for my career and I'm on a national team. It has to feel like you understand what the responsibility of being Canadian is, right? And you have to feel a real attachment to that, especially because you don't have Canadian blood.
Yeah.
Right? So, I can say that. I can, because I don't.
Yeah.
So I can say, look, for me, this is what the experience has been. And
Yes,
this is what
I
it's
would
meant.
look at it from a personal point of view. National identity to me, certainly growing up, meant everything. It certainly meant everything to me and who I am and how I would probably define myself. And I think playing international football was, and I can say it with my hand on my heart and genuinely mean it and say it was never about getting rich playing international football. It was never about a career move. It was about what it meant to me inside and the personal side of that. So this is where do you draw the line on that? Is basically what I want to ask you. I suppose.
Well, I mean, look, before I go to that, okay, we've created the Canadian coaching position, right? We've hired a ton of new Canadians into this. It wasn't all, when we hired Canadians, whether it's been video analysts, assistant coaches, set piece coaches, physical coaches, physios, we haven't always hired best available. We've almost always hired best available Canadian.
Yeah.
Right? And the reason is because I know the history of the Canadian national team and the CSA, and that there hasn't been enough representation, I think, in this position and positions like this that are Canadian and truly understand what it means to be Canadian. So my journey to get to that, or at least my version of what that means, has been really important to me, and I think leading this team. And then in the end, with the players, yeah, the best, I say this a lot even when I'm recruiting dual nationals, but even when whether we're fundraising or whether we're working on sponsorships and marketing, the best example of what this program is the players, right? And the more that, so if we may find a couple dual nationals or that aren't exactly Canadian or like our version of Canadian, but they have similar qualities and they are able to attach themselves to the identity and believe in it wholeheartedly, then I feel like if their talent is high enough and we get that right, that it will be a benefit, right? And by the way, they're already, one of the things about the group is that they're already from so many different backgrounds. In this country, we already speak French and English. In this country already, most of them are first and second generation and come from different cultures where in the house they speak different languages, they eat different kinds of food, they really have a different kind of experience than just being Canadian. Canadian isn't just like being, living in Canada. It's like now really this idea of multiculturalism and in teams, what that can mean for the potential of the athleticism, of the identity, of everything. So I am very aware that I am a custodian of this team, of this program, and that the most important thing is that when I leave, it's that more Canadians have been educated from a player perspective, from a coaching perspective, from an administrative perspective, so that this only is going to look forward and continue the trajectory that it needs to go on.
Jesse, absolute pleasure as always. Thanks for spending time with us here in this changing room. There are a lot of lucky Canadians are going to be.
I don't think we talked about football once.
It was great. Thanks, Jesse.
All right,
pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Right on.
Kevin, I enjoyed that a lot, that chat with Jesse. A very open and honest discussion, wasn't it?
He was honest, and there's not a lot of coaches and managers probably in the modern game now, Stevie, that are so honest in how they see the game and how they see personnel and even federations. He's gone in with 2 feet again, really, on CONCACAF, and he hasn't held back on his comments in the past, but he certainly reiterated that point to us on exactly what he feels about CONCACAF and how he feels disgruntled with the way that Canada are treated. Obviously, clearly not happy. The players have felt that he spoke about. A lot of the players have spoken to him that they feel that Canada get a raw deal from CONCACAF and feel as though they don't get the respect that they deserve, particularly with what's happened in the last 3 or 4 years, that Canada, over that period, have proved that they are the best team in CONCACAF. And Jesse is almost like the spokesperson for them, isn't he? That he's the guy that feels as though he's got to take responsibility on behalf of those players to get that message out there. Rightly or wrongly, there's going to be people that don't agree with some of the things that he says and some of the things and some of the ways that he goes about it. But he definitely feels certainly off with a lot of the things that have gone against him and his team, doesn't he?
I think that's what really struck out to me, the fact that as he's trying to build this culture and this togetherness, that as he's heard some of the comments from his players in terms of being, I guess at the CONCACAF level, disrespected, that he's really took on that responsibility to say that I'm going to be the guy that's going to fight for you fellas every chance I get.
I think we can maybe turn that. Have you ever felt like yourself? Do you know what I'm saying with that? I think I would have always felt that when things would have been going against my teams, whether that have been playing international or club football, I always felt a little bit at my best. Do you know what I mean with that?
Chip on your shoulder.
To have that little bit of, even if the coach is coming out with comments that press are against us or people are against us, that you can have. The old adage would have been that siege mentality.
That's what I was just going to say.
It would have been that message, wouldn't it?
That sort of underdog way. I mean, you think of Ferguson in Aberdeen way back in the early 80s in Scotland, telling his players all the time, Celtic and Rangers are the big boys. They always look down on you. Nobody wants little Aberdeen to win. So it's been a tactic from coaches for a very long time, and I think what it creates is that real team bond, that togetherness, that commitment to sort of fighting for each other, and like I said, he's sort of hung his hat on that.
I know.
He's picked up on that, and he said, I'm going to, go to the extreme levels, because we've sort of criticised Jesse and 2-game ban at the Gold Cup because his reaction to, clearly a decision that was not a penalty kick, but he's dying on that hill kind of thing.
Exactly, yeah. Did you know some of the? It's actually, as you're saying this now about siege mentality, sticks out. Giovanni Trapattoni. Now it's a great name in world football.
Your coach at Ireland.
He was our coach in Ireland, and we, off the back of what happened in 2002, and everyone probably knows the story. We'll get into that a whole lot more, I'm sure, about Roy Keane and McCarthy feud. But off the back of that, Stevie, the whole mentality around our team changed. We seemed to get more press at our games, more of the press that weren't associated with us in the past, that were more story-led, entertainment, that wanted to almost use us as fodder.
Right.
We found that if the lads were ever going out for a beer, there'd be photographs taken of us. We'd be front page of the national newspapers that we were going out, we weren't preparing right for games. They were out to get us. That's the way it felt to us.
Okay.
So we had that during Brian Kerr, who took over after Mick, and even Steve Staunton, that we didn't have great spells in qualification. So Giovanni Trapattoni comes in. And he'd obviously got wind because Liam Brady had become his assistant then, famous, one of our best players ever. He played in Italy. Everyone would remember Liam Brady, who would probably be in the know, I suppose. But Liam spoke to Trapp about these lads are getting a raw deal from the press. So his first thing he said to us when he spoke to us, he said, "You see, and I'm trying to, I'm sorry for any Italian.
I love this.
We have a saying in Italy. Italy, he says, we get newspaper, and he goes, we wipe our ass. We wipe our ass. That's what we do, and we throw it away. We throw it down the toilet. That's all it is. So the message to us was, whatever's been written about you tomorrow, somebody is using it to throw it down the toilet the next day. So forget about it. Don't you? And
you felt like
immediately
he
was our guy, and it was a clear and simple message. However, it was translated to us, but that's what I think it probably drew a lot of us. Certainly, the experienced players like me. What a manager, what a coach he is, Trapattoni, and we had a great time.
It takes bravery to be that person as well, doesn't it? To put your neck on the line and be the focal point. So I admire Jesse for that, and he's certainly a forward-thinking guy. He's an aggressive guy. We got that throughout the whole podcast. His aggressiveness to get the job in Salzburg and to go to Germany, to Leipzig, and to learn German, and even his time at Leeds, which was very difficult from Kevin. We really got that feeling that he felt stifled at Leeds. He really felt like the press were out to get him for the start, and you get that impression. And we know what that's like. We've played in environments. We've both played for Sunderland. I've played for Newcastle. We've been in environments where every day you wake up, there's nowhere to go. It's just the weight and the pressure of the situation that you're in at one of these big clubs is immense, isn't it?
I think that tees up our next podcast. We can actually leave off here now and probably go to the next podcast. I think it's an interesting one to see around pressure and players' pressure and coaches' pressure, the intensity we had Premier League, but that's happening in France, in Spain, in Italy, and I think what I found as well with it, that it probably become too much for me. But again, it'll be something that we can get into.
Well,
can't we?
everybody copes in it in different ways, and we'll get into it more. But what a great first guest for us. First podcast, part of the bus in our pub, Graham Leggett's. Can't wait to do more of these with you every week, mate.
Good man.